Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the official CIMA SCS February 2022 pre-scene complete reading video. So we're going to basically read the entire pre-scene together. This is actually coming from many requests that I've gotten. But before that, a gentle reminder to all of you. If you're interested in learning everything that you need to know about how to face the February 2022 CIMA SCS exam, you are most warmly invited to join me on the 1st of January 2022 at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time or 12:30 GMT or the equivalent from your own time zones. The link you can find in the description. I'm looking forward to meeting you on the 1st of January. On that note, we can get started. Let's read the pre-scene. And well, as you know, the pre-scene is a 30-page document. So we are going to have a bit of a lengthy video here. But this is something that has been very helpful over the years for many learners and especially on YouTube, those of them who engage with my content. And the idea is that we will read verbatim the entire pre-scene and see what they pitch. This will be particularly helpful if you're someone who is facing the exam in February. Because many of you, there are many learners who haven't been able to sit for the November 2021 iteration. So you're planning for the Feb iteration. And if you haven't really read the pre-scene, if you haven't really got the time, this might be a very helpful, useful tool, especially even from a perspective of listening as an auditory tool as well. Okay, so November 2021 and February 2022 strategic case study examination pre-scene material. They have their standard COVID-19 statement that has started to appear in case study exam pre-scene documents with a couple of, two iterations before. The COVID-19 statement says this pre-scene and the case study in general, while aiming to reflect real life, are set in a context where the COVID-19 pandemic has not had an impact. Remember, marks in the exam will be awarded for valid arguments that are relevant to the question asked. Answers that make relevant references to the pandemic or social distancing will of course be marked on their merits. In most cases, however, candidates may find it useful and helpful to assume that there are no restrictions to the movement of people, goods, or services in place. And this is something that is very useful because the moment you bring in COVID-19 to the picture, most likely your entire supply chain is disrupted because boundaries are closed, air travel, domestic travel is limited, there are many restrictions abound. So that is what they are negating from this statement to say when you're facing the exam, when you're taking up any questions, assume that there are no restrictions whatsoever, that normal operations are in place other than anything that in particular that the unseen, which is the case that you get on the exam day, presents to you. All right. So this is a very interesting case study actually. The company is Pixlwizz, which is a game development company. And they have the contents here. It spans up to 30 pages, introduction, video game industry, developing video games. Then we have the Pixlwizz portion of the pre-scene, which is an extract from the annual report, the board of directors, principal risks, share price history, and extract from a competitor's financial statements. Finally, there are 7 general news stories presented here. All right, let's get started. Introduction. Pixlwizz is a quoted company that creates and sells video games. And Pixlwizz generates revenue streams from its games in several different ways. So very interesting, especially if you're a gamer and you have only played games, this would be a good opportunity for you to get an insight into how the industry works. You're a senior manager in Pixlwizz's finance function. You report directly to the board and advise on special projects and strategic matters. Pixlwizz is based in Westland, a developed country that has an active and well-regulated stock exchange. Westland's currency is the W dollar, and Westland requires companies to prepare their financial statements in accordance with International Financial Reporting Standards, the IFRSs. Now we start the portion of the pre-scene that focuses on the video game industry. Video games take many different forms. They comprise interactive software that enables players to view and control graphic images. Globally, there are approximately 2,500 companies employing approximately 70,000 people in the development of video games. These figures do not include the many companies that support the creation and sale of video games through the manufacture and sale of hardware and the provision of operating systems and other software that supports gameplay. Game developers generated revenue of approximately $170 billion in 2020, with projected revenues of $180 billions in 2021. And they've given you a chart on the global video games revenue from 2012 to 2021, very steady increase. We're going from around $60 billion to about $200 billion, that chart. It is estimated that there are 2.7 billion video gamers worldwide, of whom 55% are male. The average age of gamers is 34 years, with a wide dispersion of player ages around that age. So 34 years, that's where the mean or the median of most gamers center around. Then you have several charts spanning throughout the pre-scene. The first one or the second one here, video gamers by age, and as you can see, from less than 18 to more than 50 years, video gamers are or they belong to all ages. And video gaming has existed in one form or another for decades, but the industry has changed constantly in response to developments in the hardware used to run gaming software. And you have a chart that talks about or that presents global video game revenue by type of device. And the interesting thing is that you will basically see every type of handheld or digital device here. Smartphone, PC laptop, tablet, smart TV, game console, handheld console, VR AR. All types of devices are being used, with smartphone and PC laptop and gaming consoles dominating the space. Now, they are basically presenting us a brief introduction and an understanding of what these different types of devices are. First, game console. Game consoles are devices that are designed to play games in the home. They're usually connected to a television screen or a monitor. Games are loaded from physical media such as cartridges or DVD-ROMs or Blu-ray discs, or they can be downloaded from the internet via the player's home Wi-Fi. Console manufacturers often design their machines so that they connect directly to the manufacturer's own website. That can simplify the process of downloading and installing software created by companies such as Pixlwizz. You basically have a family playing games picture here. We are basically talking about Xbox, PS, PlayStation, Nintendo, those kind of game consoles. Handheld consoles, device type number 2. Handheld consoles are self-contained units that have integrated screens and are battery powered, which means that they can be played without having to connect to a screen or other device. Although some handheld consoles can mirror their displays onto monitors and televisions through maybe Apple TV or Amazon Fire Stick, I think. Games can be loaded from cartridges or downloaded from the internet if the device can be connected to the internet. Handheld consoles are portable and so can be used while traveling. The third type we have is VR AR or virtual reality, which is VR, and augmented reality, which is AR. Virtual reality in particular is a major area of growth in video gaming. In a home setting, virtual reality requires players to wear headsets that contain screens that replicate the eye's binocular vision, create a sense of depth. Sensors in the headset detect head movements, and that is fed back through the screens so that the player feels immersed in the virtual world created by the software. You have a picture of a VR user and that is the headset that they're talking about. Augmented reality takes input from cameras incorporated into the headset and combines that with virtual images so that players see both simultaneously. That could, for example, create the impression that there is an exotic bird hovering in the player's living room. So, what virtual reality does is immersed into the player's own environment, player's own through the cameras in the headset, which takes in the pictures and the video of the existing environment and places the digital content into that environment. VR headsets are generally used in conjunction with other gaming devices such as PCs or consoles. That brings us to the next type of device, PC and laptops. And this seems to be the most popular version. As we see most biggest games in the world, their early versions are released for PC. That is probably because most of the bugs can be fixed and the game compatibility can be checked, etc. And the sheer popularity is massive. So video games are essentially just software, and so many games are written for conventional computers. Those games are generally downloaded from the internet, although they may also be purchased in DVD-ROM form. Video games generally require significant amounts of processing power. Serious gamers often invest heavily in powerful graphics cards and other components that can cope with the demands created by games. So you have your CPU, to which you have to install so many things, the audio drivers, the audio card, the graphics card, maybe from a company like Nvidia or AMD, etc. Then we have the next type of devices, that is a group, tablet, smartphones, and smart TV. Many consumer devices, such as these, have sufficient processing power to offer gameplay. Players can download games onto their phones, tablets, and smart televisions. Those will not offer the same processing power as consoles or PCs, but they are convenient and may avoid the need to buy a separate device to run gaming software. And what happens is that most games have different versions. That is for mobile, that is for PC, that is for gaming consoles, etc. Developments in the video game industry have been driven largely by improvements in the hardware devices that are available to gamers. For example, improvements in the graphics processors used in PCs and consoles have encouraged game developers to create games that make full use of that processing power. Many games offer players the opportunity to engage with a virtual world that comes close to being photographic in terms of image quality. That is quite detailed, very, very detailed. Many video games require players to have access to websites through which the players can access their accounts and on which they can play games. Those websites are generally cloud-based. The introduction of a cloud-based gaming is, or rather, the introduction of cloud-based gaming is a relatively recent development that is expected to be a huge growth area in the industry. Websites can be provided by hardware manufacturers, particularly those who make consoles like Sony, they produce PlayStation, or by companies who create and sell game software like Pixlwizz, or by stand-alone companies who provide this facility as a commercial service. The providers of these websites will collect any payments that are due from players for their gameplay. There are various ways in which revenue can be generated from games. And here you have a graph or a chart or charts that shows the revenue composition, global revenue composition, one particularly from PC-based games and the other particularly from console-based games. Now, PC-based games has several categories: free-to-play, social games, downloads and boxed games that you can purchase off the shelf and download through the Wi-Fi, pay-to-play games online mostly, and this recently booming portion or section, cloud gaming. Console-based, you mainly have downloads and boxed games and free-to-play games. Take a look at what these specifically are. So downloads and boxed games require the player to pay to download the software or to purchase it on an item of physical medium such as a console game cartridge or a DVD-ROM or a Blu-ray disc. The payment entitles the player to run the game and may also grant access to online forums for play against other human competitors. That's downloads and boxed games. Very popular, very well known, widely available. Pay to play games. They require players to pay a relatively small amount each time they wish to log in and play, or they must make a monthly subscription payment. Pay to play. So you pay to play. Cloud gaming is essentially a form of pay to play that has recently been introduced by some game companies, where the gamers, so pay to play is just essentially direct play, but here pay attention. Gamers pay a monthly fee that entitles them to play any of a selection of games offered by the company. So it's like you're purchasing your own space in the cloud, and in that space you can download or you can assign whatever games you need through which your purchases have been made. So any of those games you can play. These games are played over the internet and are streamed to the gamers' devices. And it has actually made online gaming a really booming sector. Free-to-play games. These can be downloaded or run directly from a website. The player must register and is given the opportunity to make in-game purchases. So within the game, while you're playing in-game, you can make various purchases. For example, some online games require players to create characters who must develop skills and gather objects through play that will be of use to them in their virtual environment. So as you're playing, you need certain tools, you need to strengthen your power levels, etc. You can pay using your credit card or whatsoever, and then acquire those skills. Many of these gamers or many of these games restrict gamers' ability to play effectively unless they purchase tokens that can be exchanged online for virtual objects such as maps or magical powers that can enhance their characters. The monetary cost of these purchases is generally only a few cents per item, but purchasing opportunities are frequent and continue throughout the game, even into the most advanced levels. Then we have social games, which are available through social networks. They are often paid for by advertisers who can develop games that promote their brands and products. So you see, social games are very popular, especially in Facebook. Most online games, including those that are free to play, require the entry of a valid credit card number. That is partly to ensure that the game account is being created by an adult, even if the intention is to create an account for a child's use. It may then be possible for players to charge the cost of upgrades or enhancements to that card. Countless stories we hear where an elder, the father or the mother, uses their credit card to make a purchase for the kid to play a game, and then a couple of years later, the kid makes a whole lot of purchases. Suddenly, the credit card bill is home. Game companies set up the terms under which credit cards can be charged. So it's the game companies that set the terms. In the license agreement that must be accepted when the player's account is created, that terms and conditions that we say I agree. Game accounts can often take automatic payments from credit cards unless that facility is disabled by the credit card holder. All right. Next, we are going to move on to another main section, particularly on developing video games. And when we have to talk about developing video games, the pre-scene says there are many different types of games, reflecting the interests of different players and the capabilities and limitations of their preferred devices for gameplay. Let's take a look at a few that the pre-scene points out. First one, puzzle. These games involve an intellectual challenge with no need for quick reactions. There may be computerized versions of traditional board or card games. For example, the player may play chess or draughts with the software acting as the opponent, or they may play a card game such as poker or solitaire. Next, we have action games. These take many different forms, but they are characterized by the fact that they involve a physical challenge, usually stressing hand-eye coordination. These games include many types, many subcategories. Some of them are action games, which are variations on puzzle games in which players must react quickly to patterns or objects that appear on their screens. Otherwise, they will lose a life or the game will end. Platform games involve guiding a fantasy character on a journey, dealing with hazards along the way. For example, the character might have to jump over tripwires or duck to avoid lightning bolts. Simulating a challenge set in a realistic virtual world as seen through a character's eyes. I think one of the most famous simulators in the world is Microsoft Flight Simulator. So for example, the player might see a patch of jungle from the point of view of a soldier who must carry out a patrol without being seen by enemy troops or being injured by wildlife. Then you have a subcategory, simulations, where the gameplay puts the player in control of a vehicle or other item. For example, a flight simulator would put the player in charge of an aircraft. Simulators can be written to emulate, and when you say written, it's software writing, designing and developing softwares, especially the writing part, which involves writing code, software code. So simulators can be written to emulate the physical challenges and to make the gameplay very realistic. For example, a rally driving simulator might offer a choice of cars and circuits. The software would then offer a very similar experience to driving that car. For instance, a more powerful car accelerating faster. Some simulators offer an almost cinematic representation of the setting. For example, a ship simulator might offer a very detailed view of the wharf as it would be seen from the ship's bridge with realistic buildings, cranes, and even dock workers on the pier. Hardware manufacturers sell a wide range of peripherals that can be plugged into computers or consoles to assist in simulator gameplay. For example, you can buy a gaming various gadgets like the steering wheel, where you can, instead of using the keyboard, you use a gaming steering wheel to manage your vehicles, driving your cars, your bike rides, etc. Another character or category of games is sports. Players can take control of their favorite team, or they can control an individual team member in order to put themselves right inside the action. For example, a soccer game might enable the player to act as the team manager, making team selections and deciding on tactics. More sophisticated games allow for the strengths and weaknesses of the team's squad members. The game will then permit the player's team to compete against a computerized opponent, or the software will show its predicted outcome of a match against another human player's chosen team tactics. Games between human opponents may involve a pre-arranged competition between friends, or they may assign opponents who happen to be online and who are interested in playing. You either pre-arrange and multiplay, which is the function where you pre-arrange between friends, or it might automatically, if you're playing online, you might automatically choose your partners and opponents also. Alternatively, some games permit the player to take control of a particular team member for the duration of the match. Such games allow for real-world attributes such as speed, stamina, and skill. When games are played online, the players often receive scores and rankings based on the number of games played and their success or failure in those games. There are video game versions of most popular sports, and one very popular game is EA Games' FIFA, I think the 2021-22 versions are coming up. The next category we have is RTS, real-time strategy. RTS games dispense with the concept of players taking turns against either a human or a computerized opponent. They enable players to put the elements under their control into operation as they wish and to make changes as they proceed. For example, an RTS game might start with the player being given control of, say, 20 workers who are at the edge of a blanked out screen. Now, what the player must do is then make strategic decisions as to how many of those workers will be put to work on various tasks such as construction, agriculture, and exploration. If the player makes sensible choices, then the workers will gather resources and create an affluent state. RTS games are usually involve a competition against computerized or other human opponents who are competing for the same limited or scarce resources. Then you have massive multiplayer online MMOs. These games involve the player taking on the role of a character in a huge and detailed virtual world, which is why we call it massive multiplayer. For example, the player might take on the role of an elf in a fantasy world, like the Lord of the Rings. The player would then be free to roam that world to use or collect objects and to interact with other characters, most of whom would be controlled by other human players. For example, the two players might trade items with one another, or they could decide to fight. So you're basically talking about multiple players, multiplayers in a massive world, which is how massive multiplayer online is made up of. As the game progresses, the character will develop skills and will amass goods. There is, however, always a risk that the character will die, which will require the player to restart the game from the very beginning. Finally, the pre-scene talks about educational games, which in a sense is ironical because this is an exam. However, they say these games are generally designed to help children develop skills such as shape and pattern recognition. The gameplay is designed to reward players for correctly identifying or classifying an item, and so they can combine elements of education and play. And in no way, by no means, this list is complete. That is why the pre-scene says this list is not intended to be exhaustive, and many games combine elements of two or more categories. And they say games can be written with a view to enabling individual play, cooperative play, or competitive play against human opponents. Individual play may involve solving puzzles or playing against virtual opponents. Cooperative and competitive play involves playing either with or against human players. Some consoles permit multiple players to play simultaneously, with the screen divided to enable each player to control his or her character. Most cooperative and competitive gameplay requires players to log into a website and play as team members or opponents over the internet. So you're basically talking about games like even Call of Duty, which is very popular, where if you have 4 friends, the 4 friends can create a team and all of them can log into the game, maybe from their own PCs or a single PC, multiple screens, etc. It doesn't matter. And then undertake a mission, and the 4 of them have to coordinate, communicate, and achieve the mission outcomes. Now we move on to an interesting section that is very closely related to the company ourselves. Many people, they say many people are involved in the creation of a video game. So we are going to learn some of the critical people or critical staff labels that are in a video game development company. The first one, the game producer, who is in overall charge of the commissioning and development of a video game. Video game companies develop ideas internally through market research, and they also draw upon ideas suggested by gamers who participate in social media forums. Then you have game designers. They create the basic brief, they design the game. They create the basic brief that drives development. The designer must make decisions concerning the nature of the game and the way players will interact with game elements. Those decisions allow for both the nature of the gameplay and the aesthetic appeal of the game's appearance and soundtrack. Then you have game artists. They use the designer's brief to create the characters and the backgrounds. Those must be suitable both for programming as game elements and also as art for promotional material such as the web pages and box art if the games are to be supplied on digital media. Then you have level designers. Level designers expand upon the designer's brief. So, by creating the story underpinning a game, for example, an RTS game, real-time strategy game, might progress through several levels, with each level changing the nature of the gameplay slightly and possibly the appearance of the background and of the controllable elements such as characters. Level designers must also adapt the files created by the game artists to ensure that they can be programmed and incorporated into the game. Now, that may require compromises such as deciding on the complexity of a game element. Greater complexity enhances realism, but it also requires more processing power and could overtax the hardware on which the game is being played. So it's actually a trade-off decision that you have to make. Are you going to overdo the complexity and the processing requirement for the game and ultimately end up losing customers because there are few customers who can spend that much to have the hardware? Or do you compromise on it and balance it off in a way that it is compatible even maybe for hardware versions that are a couple of years old? Then you have game programmers. They create the actual software code base for the game itself. This is a complex area and there are many programming specialisms. Programmers often develop software that can be used for game development. Elements created by the game development software will then be combined with software written for specific parts of the game itself. For example, a driving simulator might use game development software packages, create elements such as buildings that appear on the horizon and change in size and shape as the virtual car under the player's control gets closer and as the angle changes with twists and turns in the road. Game development software also encompasses features such as physical devices that determine the effects of, say, pressing the car's brake pedal. Video games require significant amounts of time and effort in programming, and the creation of a new game might require hundreds of programmers working in collaboration for many months. That is particularly true of MMOs, massive multiplayer online games, and some simulations that require the creation of a large virtual location that can be explored during the game. Some games are much smaller in comparison but will still require programming skill. For example, a puzzle game for a smartphone will not require many programmers, but every element of the game will still have to be designed and programmed. Then you have game testers. Finally, here, game testers ensure they test the game. So the game testers ensure that the game is working correctly by playing levels that have been written. The testers are checking for programming errors but are also interested in the playing experience. It is just as important to feedback that a particular level is not enjoyable to play or that an element of the game serves no useful purpose even if there are no errors in the program code. So it's not necessarily troubleshooting from a code perspective, but also the gaming experience. Game testers will also consider the suitability of the game for target markets. Might be necessary to indicate that players could be disturbed by, say, a highly realistic depiction of a crash in a driving simulation game. Successful video games must be playable. End of the day, playability implies that the game itself is enjoyable to play. If it's not enjoyable, people are going to give it up. Players must be interested in achieving the game's goals, whatever they may be. They must also be provided with a suitable interface that enables them to interact with the game effectively and without undue distraction. So even opening the game, how the game can be accessed, the way you can access the menus, the options, the features, etc. It has to be a suitable graphical interface which is pleasant and which is easy to navigate for gamers. That brings us to the next section, and the precede says game design must consider the limitations of the hardware device on which it will be played. For example, a smartphone game must be suitable for play on a relatively small screen with game control offered through the phone's touch screen. A console game offers much more scope for detailed graphics because they will be displayed on a television screen. So what they're basically explaining is that when you have a gaming console like what you see in the image, you don't need the screen to display those controls, which in the case of a smartphone, the buttons and the gameplay controls are in the screen itself. So you don't have the full view of the screen. The console controllable buttons are placed on the screen that takes up or rather diminishes the gameplay view in a smartphone. A console and the games themselves can be more complex because players will have controllers equipped with joysticks and buttons. Here you go. Now, let's talk a little bit about publishing a game. So, game publishers monitor the success or failure of a published or of published games using a variety of key performance indicators, KPIs, many of which depend on the fact that most games are played online. Now, we have a few very popular, even if you type in the website or just in general Google, saying KPIs of video game development companies, all the main KPIs are included here. The first, number of daily active users, DAU, which is self-explanatory. This KPI refers to the number of people who play a game on any given day. Companies also track, secondly, the number of monthly average users, which is less subject to distortion because of alternatives such as major sporting fixtures or weekday versus weekend. Then gaming companies also measure MAU over DAU. So that's monthly active users as a percentage or as a fraction of DAU, because that gives an insight into the frequency of play. The higher that statistic, the more enjoyable a game must be. That is basically when you're considering the ratio between daily active users and monthly active users on average, what happens is that higher the ratio, it means that bulk of the daily active users are retained throughout the month. That most of the gamers, higher the ratio, meaning that more gamers are engaged with the game consistently throughout the month. Companies also track average sessions per user, the number of sessions per user, in order to establish how frequently the average user plays. Related KPIs also include average session length, so for how long one of these sessions last. These statistics offer a further insight into the gamers or into the game's popularity. Companies track retention over different time frames, measuring the percentage of newly registered players who return within, say, 24 hours or 7 days or 28 days. The above statistics can be linked to player spend to establish the average revenue per user, ARPU, or the average revenue per DAU, daily active user. And finally, one of the most popular KPIs in the gaming industry is the K factor, which is a measure of the extent to which existing players attract new players. It is sometimes thought of as a viral coefficient, and it can be expressed as an absolute number as well. For example, if existing players recommend a game, there's a game, and existing players recommend a game to 1 million friends. So the game has been recommended to 1 million friends, and if 300,000 of those friends register as players, then considering the ratio of 1 million to 300,000, the K factor is 1.3 million over 1 million, 1.3. Most countries require video games to be classified in order to prevent children from being exposed to unsuitable content, such as on-screen violence. Each country has its own system for rating games, perhaps setting a minimum age of 18 or 21 for games designed for an adult audience and lower minimums for children at different stages of development. That marks the end of the section of your pre-scene that gives you a preview of the overall gaming industry by and large. Next, we move on to the section on Pixlwizz. But before we do that, I'd like to give you a couple of reminders. One is, you know that on YouTube, there's a main playlist called the CIMA SCS November and February 2022 main playlist. That is an exclusive collection of useful content that is particularly helpful for you to face the SCS exam, not only from a pre-scene perspective, but mostly from a writing perspective as well. And motivation, guidance, instructions, risks, what to do, what not to do, everything is included here. And this is something that I would like to invite all of you to check out. There may be many videos that are very, very helpful, that have helped many learners before you. And I'm hoping that you will also make the best of it. And you can also log into my website, www.cimascs.com, and check out the arsenal of content and how this end-to-end CIMA strategic case study coaching program is designed and developed to help you. There are many tools for you to use, utilize, and access, and mocks to get marked, support, motivation, feedback from other learners, etc., instructions, guidance, and you can check it out freely. On that note, I'd like to go back to the pre-scene. Let's continue. Pixlwizz, which is our company. Pixlwizz was founded in 1986. Ownership of home computers was growing, and the founders were keen to establish themselves as game developers to supply that new market. The company has grown steadily throughout that period, establishing itself as one of the world's leading game developers. So we are, or you are, one of the world's leading game developers. Pixlwizz offers a range of games for all major hardware types and across major game types. So all of those game types, hardware types we saw earlier in the pre-scene, Pixlwizz offers a range of games for all. It offers the leading games in terms of player numbers and revenue generated in many of those categories. Pixlwizz's Scratchy Swan MMO, Massive Multiplayer Online, has more than 300 million registered players worldwide, which is a big number. Over the past year, there has been an average of 800,000 players online and playing the game at any given time. So most likely DAU or even average MAU will most likely be about close to 800,000 if this is the statistic. For Pixlwizz's Scratchy Swan Massive Multiplayer Online game. Pixlwizz has 5,100 employees, so big company, half of whom are based at the company's head office in Westlands Media City. The remainder are based in the company's 3 overseas offices. So the structure is pretty simple. They have a regional SBU structure. The head office being in Westland. They have 3 offices, Eastland, Southland, and Northland. The head office in Westland is the administrative base, and it is the home to PC game development, and it is also the base for global marketing strategy and local marketing in Westland and surrounding region. Then, if we look at the Eastland office, it is the home to mobile game development, and which is basically smartphone and tablets, and it is also the base for local marketing for Eastland and the surrounding region. Southland office is the home to console game development, and it is the base for local marketing for the Southland and surrounding region. And finally, Northland office is the home to research and development activities, and it is the base for local marketing for Northland and the surrounding region. So you will notice that each of the offices individually have their local marketing strategy operating from those offices, with global marketing in the head office also being the administrative base. And in terms of game development, head office and Westland office develops PC games, Eastland office develops mobile games, and Southland office develops console games. And finally, Northland office is the home to R&D activities. Pixlwizz was founded in Westland, and it still has its head office in that country. The head office is the base for all of the group's administrative functions, and the head office also acts as a base for the development of PC-based video games. The 3 overseas offices were acquired individually as Pixlwizz expanded. They didn't fall into their lap. They individually organically grew and maybe acquired also and moved into new areas of game development. Each overseas office has its own specialism regarding programming for different gaming platforms, as we saw now. The Northland office's research and development activities are focused on the creation of new and improved game development software that is used elsewhere in the Pixlwizz group to create games for sale. The Northland office is also heavily engaged in research for new approaches to game development, such as the integration of VR headsets into updated versions of Pixlwizz's PC and console games. All of Pixlwizz's games are intended for sale to a global market, and games can be installed with different language options, for on-screen prompts, and for any speech in their soundtrack. The head office is the base for global marketing, which is responsible for developing global strategy, such as prioritizing different approaches to game development and scheduling the release dates for new games. All of the sales are managed by global marketing. Each of the 4 offices is the base for a regional marketing function which supports global marketing strategy by studying. So what do these regional marketing functions do? They say by studying local trends from gamers in their respective countries and surrounding geographical regions. The regional marketing managers can also recommend ways to adapt advertising and other forms of promotional activity to better match the interests of local gamers. All the 4 offices are located in countries that have strong video game markets. This assists in the development of new games because each office can host focus groups and panel discussions involving local gamers, reflecting local tastes and preferences in key markets. That is very useful information. Pixlwizz enjoys strong sales around the world and has many successful titles. Unfortunately, even a major producer such as Pixlwizz cannot predict the popularity of new games or the longevity of existing titles. One of the strategies pursued by Pixlwizz has been the development and maintenance of franchises, which is the industry term for a range of games that are effectively sequels to a successful original. Developers have discovered that it is often more effective to modify and enhance a popular game with additional features than to create a completely new game. Players enjoy returning to a favorite game that includes new settings or exciting new elements. The board constantly reviews Pixlwizz's digital strategy to ensure that digital opportunities are identified and exploited in order to increase its competitive advantage. Pixlwizz's most successful game to date has been Jacob Plunge, which was launched as a console-based action game in 2016. it rapidly became the best-selling game that year. In 2017, Pixlwizz launched a PC version to sell alongside the console game. New versions of the game have been launched every year since 2018. The latest version, Jacob Plunge Moonstar, is presently Pixlwizz's biggest single source of revenue. Earlier versions of the game continue to generate revenues. Collectively, the different versions of Jacob Plunge, all of it, contribute 19% of Pixlwizz's revenue. One game, one franchise contributing to 19% of Pixlwizz's revenue. Most of Pixlwizz's revenue is from games that are downloaded or accessed through the internet on a pay-to-play basis. These take the forms of downloads, standalone pay-to-play games, and free-to-play games. Games for consoles and handheld consoles are generally downloaded from the console manufacturer's website, which they host on the cloud. The console manufacturers collect any payments for gameplay or for in-game purchases and remit that to Pixlwizz after deducting a commission for providing this service. Pixlwizz has its own website for games downloaded to or accessed on PCs, laptops, smartphones, and tablets. All of the payments with respect to these are made directly to Pixlwizz through the website, although the website itself is hosted by Cloudbo, a quoted company that provides internet services to commercial customers. And Pixlwizz continues to sell games on physical media such as cartridges for consoles and DVD-ROM for PCs. These are manufactured and packaged by third-party specialists in Westland. Demand for physical media is weak in most developed countries, but there is a viable demand for boxed games from countries where internet access is slow or unreliable. Next, we have a direct extract from Pixlwizz's annual report. Firstly, Pixlwizz's vision, mission, and values. Our vision: Pixlwizz will always be the best game developer in the real and the virtual worlds. Our mission: Pixlwizz exists to attract the talented people who create virtual worlds that enable gamers to immerse themselves in exciting realities. Pixlwizz creates exciting places to work and to play. What are the core values of Pixlwizz? 4. There are imagination, innovation, commitment, and teamwork. Imagination. Pixlwizz creates the places in which gamers wish to spend their free time, whether settling down for an evening's gameplay or just passing the time on a commute to work. Innovation. Pixlwizz games set trends across the industry because we strive to surprise and excite gamers with every new release. Commitment. Pixlwizz is the place where talented people wish to work. Our creative staff are passionate about developing new ideas and leading the way in creating new forms of gameplay. Teamwork. Pixlwizz relies on cooperation between all workers across all levels. Games can only be created if there are talented creative people who can count on the support of the colleagues who manage the space in which they put their talents to work. Those are the 4 values: imagination, innovation, commitment, and teamwork. Pixlwizz's board of directors. Firstly, we have Jose Sols Lucia, non-executive chair. Jose had a successful career as a lawyer specializing in sports management. He has been a managing partner of one of Westland's leading law firms. He subsequently served as chair of the Westland Soccer Association. Jose joined Pixlwizz's board in 2017. Then we have Ilana Shamir, Chief Executive Officer. Ilana joined Pixlwizz in 1997 as a games producer. She was responsible for the development of Mac Jupiter, which was the company's most successful RTS game at the time. Ilana became head of product development in 2008, and Ilana was promoted to Chief Operating Officer in 2013. Ilana was promoted to Chief Executive Officer in 2016. Then we have Afifi Al-Akiti, the Chief Operating Officer. Afifi has a master's degree in software engineering. He has worked for several software companies in a software development role. His most recent appointment before Pixlwizz was as Chief Information Officer of a major car manufacturer. Afifi's responsibilities include external liaison, that is primarily concerned with managing relations between Pixlwizz and third parties who manufacture and sell the hardware that gamers use to play Pixlwizz's games. Changes to the specification of consoles, PCs and smartphones can affect users' ability to run games. That is what Afifi is primarily managing through the relationship with console manufacturers and hardware manufacturers. Afifi joined Pixlwizz as Chief Operating Officer in 2018. Maria Tectonidou, Chief Finance Officer. Maria trained as an accountant with a manufacturing company. She has since worked in a variety of finance-related roles with several major companies. Her most recent role prior to joining Pixlwizz was as Director of Finance at a games console manufacturing company. Maria joined Pixlwizz as Chief Finance Officer in 2016. Ziwu Shen, Chief Commercial Officer. Ziwu's background is in marketing. He has held several senior marketing positions in the course of his career. He joined Pixlwizz as Head of Global Marketing in 2015. Ziwu was promoted to his present position in 2018. Then we have, so those are the 4 executive members. Then we have the non-executive members after the chairman, of course. Kristina Leonova, Independent Non-Executive Director. Kristina was a senior manager in a major television company for most of her career, reaching the company's board before stepping down from full-time employment. She joined Pixlwizz's board as a non-executive director in 2018. Then we have Klaus Koschok, Independent Non-Executive Director. Klaus has served on the boards of several technology companies, including a leading smartphone manufacturer. He retired from full-time employment and was asked to join Pixlwizz's board as a non-executive in 2019. And then we have Anna Bredstrom, Independent Non-Executive Director. Anna has had a successful career in banking and finance. She was finance director of a major quoted electronics company before her retirement, and she joined Pixlwizz's board as a non-executive director in 2020. Then we have a summary table of executive directors' areas of functional responsibility. Afifi, the Chief Operating Officer, Afifi Al-Akiti, is in charge of game development and programming and external liaison. Maria Tectonidou, the Chief Finance Officer, is in charge of accounting and finance, treasury, and buildings management. Ziwu Chen, the Chief Commercial Officer, is in charge of marketing, human resources, and public relations. And Ilana Shamir, the Chief Executive Officer, is leading the rest of the members and is acting as the main leader or chief executive of the company. If we look at the memberships of board committees, all the committees exist in Pixlwizz, that is Audit Committee, Risk Committee, Remuneration Committee, and Nomination Committee. Each committee has 3 members. Somehow, Audit Committee includes the chairman and 2 others. Risk Committee includes the chairman and 2 others. Remuneration includes the chairman and 2 others. Nomination Committee includes the chairman, and two others. The point of note here is that the chairman, the non-executive chair, is sitting in all of the committees, which is not a major issue, but specifically in the audit committee as well, which might be something that it would be preferable if you can cross-match with corporate governance requirements to see whether they are in compliance or not. They don't seem to be in direct breach of any matter, but there are a few theoretical things that you can touch on here. Then we have Pixlwizz's principal risk register, and they only have two columns, risk and risk mitigation. So let's go through them one by one. The first one, risk, is that Pixlwizz is dependent upon the continuing success of a small number of game franchises. Jacob Plunge provides 19% of our total revenue, and our 6 best-selling franchises, including Jacob Plunge, generate 82% of revenue. So they said they have games for all types of devices, all types of games, but only 6 best-selling franchises are generating 82% of the revenue. Clear Pareto here. A successful launch by one of our competitors could cost us the revenue from one of these key franchises. And how do they mitigate it? Pixlwizz invests heavily in both time and money on maintaining close contact with gamers in order to ensure that our games remain popular and exciting. We aim to offer new versions while demand for existing titles is strong, so that gamers do not actually become bored with our games. We have many new games in the pipeline. That's another way. They have many games in the pipeline, and we stand ready to replace any existing titles, including popular franchises that no longer excite our customers. That's how they mitigate that. The second risk is the development of exciting new games may be inhibited by the limitations of the hardware on which our software must run. So this limitation, how they tackle it is that Pixlwizz encourages third-party manufacturers, particularly those manufacturing dedicated games hardware such as consoles, to develop their products so that we can offer improved gameplay through their devices in our latest software. The next risk is that some third-party hardware manufacturers also develop and publish their own games, and in that respect are also our direct competitors. Now, that the mitigation of that is that our role as a leading games developer ensures that these third parties remain responsive to our needs, in addition to those of their own software designers and of the other competing development companies. So sort of like this ecosystem model where all the players are important for each other is being stressed upon here. And by players, I mean the roles within the industry, not players, game players. All right. The next risk is game creation is a complicated process that requires both technical and creative skills. Pixlwizz is heavily dependent on retaining skilled staff. The creative process requires specialist teams of workers who can develop games for each of the main types of device or hardware devices. And how do they mitigate it? Pixlwizz pays close attention to staffing and the implications of losing key staff. So they're trying to retain the best people. Staff who would be relatively easy to replace, such as game programmers, they are paid slightly more than the industry average to deter them from leaving. Those in key roles, such as game producers, designers, and artists, are paid much more than the industry average and are provided with a range of benefits that are intended to retain their services. Junior creative staff are given extensive training in order to create a steady flow of potential replacements for any senior staff who decide to leave. Then we have another risk. Our business model is heavily dependent on the availability of internet connectivity for downloads and online gaming, and for the secure collection and remittance of players' payments. However, and in addition, players access many of Pixlwizz's games through the cloud-based facilities provided by third parties. The major console manufacturers offer online and cloud gaming environments that are compatible with their hardware. We rely on the facilities offered by CloudBo for the environment required by those of our games that are designed to run on generic hardware types such as smartphones, PCs, and tablets. These environments offer tempting targets to cyber attackers. And to mitigate this, Pixlwizz works closely with all third parties to minimize the risk that our software will increase the vulnerability of their networks to malware or other forms of attack. The console manufacturers and CloudBo are major quoted companies and all have a clear incentive to maintain adequate security. So, internet connectivity and the exposure it brings, which is tackled by having a reliable supplier with you, apparently, and working closely with all third parties. That marks the end of the risk register that has been given in the pre-scene. And then we have the financial statements for Pixlwizz and a competitor. You basically have group consolidated statement of profit and loss, the changes in equity, the balance sheet, statement of financial position for Pixlwizz group, and thereafter you have the share price history of Pixlwizz, where you can see a very gradual and volatile yet sort of an exponential growth as well. They say that Pixlwizz's beta is 0.71, so less than 1, even though, so it is something that you need to match and connect and combine when you do your financials analysis elsewhere to ensure that you have a proper holistic view of how the numbers and the financial performance look. Thereafter, there is an extract from a competitor's financial statements. The competitor that has been given to you is Prantain Group. Similar to Pixlwizz, you have the consolidated statement of P&L, you have the changes in equity, and you have the statement of financial position. So make sure that you go through all of these numbers and do your financials analysis. That is a separate segment in terms of pre-scene analysis, but which is quite straightforward and easy as well. This brings me to the final section or final portion of the pre-scene, the news stories. And as I mentioned, there are a bunch of different types, different varieties. Firstly, you have a Q&A from Happy Comic. Readers' questions. Question: I would like to create a space travel game for my console. Players would build rockets and fly to planets. Wow. They would explore the universe by building bigger rockets every time they landed on a new planet and gathered resources. Can I just buy blank game cartridges that I can write my game onto? This is asked by Mark, who is aged 13. Answer: it sounds like an exciting game, but you probably won't be able to do it on your own. Video games are created. This is the important part. The video games are created by teams of experts. A game like yours would require designers and artists to develop plans for how the game will be played and decide what it will look like. It sounds as if each new planet is going to be a different level, and that will require more development work to set the challenges and design the gameplay for each. For example, one planet might have dangerous plant life and another might have no atmosphere. Each will require differences in gameplay experience and graphics. Finally, the game will have to be turned into computer code by a team of programmers. Some of the most popular games require hundreds of programmers to create all of the software code. Next time you play a game on your console, just look at the amount of detail that had to be programmed into it. For example, the sky must look brighter if your character turns towards the sun and darker if he turns away from it. Companies need teams of designers and hundreds of programmers because every single detail must be thought of and programmed. Why don't you email your idea to one of the big development companies? They are always keen to hear from fans, and they do sometimes turn their ideas into new games. That's a response to Mark. Then Maria, aged 12, is asking us a question, or asking a reader's question. I was playing Swerver Squirrel last night and was amazed that all the trees in the forest were different. Did the game's developers have to draw every single tree? Good question. The answer says game developers have software tools called algorithms that save them a huge amount of time and effort when they are creating game elements. For example, each major company will have its own software tools for creating specific things like trees, grass, water, and so on. The development team can, for example, create a sea view and can specify whether the water is calm or stormy. Now, algorithms can be used in lots of less obvious ways. Buildings have different textures depending on whether they are made from bricks, stone, or concrete. There are algorithms that can fill in the bricks on an outline that are not only the right size and shape, but they can be made to appear mossy and decayed if the wall is supposed to be old, or that can have water dripping off of them if the scene is meant to show that it is raining. The next time you guide Swerver Squirrel through the forest, remember that the textures and details are all being filled in by mathematical models or algorithms that require just a few inputs from the programmers to create a detailed background that frees the programmers to concentrate on the specific issues required for gameplay, such as drawing controllable characters. In fact, this is quite an interesting idea because game development has a lot of algorithms involved. Very famous game development softwares are there. One very famous one is called Unreal Engine. You can just type www.unreal.com and check it out. They have some really interesting ideas, or rather launches, newer versions that they have launched, especially with the Matrix Resurrection movie. There's a new Matrix game that is coming up, and the game has been entirely built through the latest version of that Unreal game development software, which has very advanced algorithms which fill in the details of the games. The third item we have is from the Westland Telegraph. Spot the odd one out, it says. When IT professionals are developing software, they often offer their superiors a choice: good, fast, or cheap. Pick any two. So they're giving three options: good, fast, or cheap. You can't choose all three. You have to pick or choose two of them. In other words, choices and trade-offs have to be made between desirable outcomes associated with the software. For example, it is always possible to add additional features to a program, but that is likely to make the result more expensive to produce or delay its completion date. And the trade-off between cost, speed, and quality can often be highlighted in the complex area of testing new software that is under development. The software industry claims that it can reduce the number of errors to 1 to 25 defects. 1 to 25 defects per KLOC, that is per 1,000 lines of delivered code. So for every 1,000 lines, the software industry claims that they can reduce the number of errors to 1 to 25. However, testing draft code can take different forms. One significant choice that must be made is between black box testing and white box testing. Black box testing involves checking the functionality of a piece of software by making inputs and checking that the outputs are in line with expectations. Like sampling, you grab a piece of the software and work with that. That may detect many programming errors, but there can be no guarantee that the tests involved every possible combination of inputs. White box testing involves the study of the source code to check the program's response to the input. It is therefore more likely to detect any programming errors, but it is also more, because you're going to the source code, it is also more time consuming and expensive. So that is one way that you have to choose between the trade-off. If you choose black box testing, job will get done faster, but no guarantee that you will have tested all the inputs. But if you choose white box testing, you can check all the inputs, but it's going to take longer and going to probably get more tedious because you're directly checking the source code. The next news item, again from the Westland Telegraph, the headline says, gamers queue all night for Jacob Plunge Magenta. Video game stores remained open until 3 o'clock this morning to cater for keen gamers who wished to be amongst the first to own the latest version of Pixlwizz's popular Jacob Plunge franchise. The official launch of this game was scheduled for precisely midnight. Many shops reported that customers had started to arrive up to 24 hours before the game became available for sale. So these must be hardcore fans. Many shops had erected shelters on the pavement and provided security staff to ensure the safety of their customers. A spokesperson for Pixlwizz commented that the company recognized that Jacob Plunge had become a global phenomenon and that they would do everything that was required to ensure that the game remained popular. See last week's review of Jacob Plunge Magenta. Then the next news item, again from the Westland Telegraph, user acquisition is the name of the game. Video game publishers have discovered that viral marketing can be the most effective way to enhance sales. Put simply, players who enjoy a particular game are likely to recommend it to their friends, some of whom will undoubtedly buy their own copies and so further boost the publisher's revenue. While viral marketing is hardly new, the prevalence of social media and the fact that most video games are played online means that it is easy for happy gamers to encourage their friends to buy copies of a favorite game. The importance of this aspect of marketing has led to the development of models that can be used to estimate and track the K factor, or the viral coefficient that we learned earlier, which is the number of new players who have been attracted to play by existing players. The higher the K factor, the better, because new players will hopefully have contacts of their own whom they can encourage to play. Then we have from Westland Daily News, gamers cut off by ship's anchor. See what this is about. Many of the world's video gamers had a disappointing weekend when they tried to log into their accounts on Saturday morning, only to discover that they could not access their favorite games. Cloudbo, the service company that provides the cloud-based environment that hosts the gaming software from leading game companies such as Pixlwizz and Prantain, so Cloudbo is not only our service provider, they were the victim of a catastrophic incident or accident. The company's servers rely on a major fiber optic data cable for their internet connection. A section of that cable runs along the seabed of the Westland Sea. The ship was forced to drop anchor after its engines failed and its anchor severed the cable in a freak accident. Wow. Cloudbow issued an apology but insisted that the accident was due to unforeseen circumstances. The company's servers are located in a remote area of Westland for security reasons, and its data links are designed to be secure. So they had done everything they could possibly. Many gamers posted complaints that their game companies had let them down. Most were unaware that their fund relied on a third party for purchases and for gameplay, not only Pixlwizz or Branudeen for that matter. There are other critical stakeholders involved like service providers. Then we have the final news item, a game review from the Westland Daily News, Keppel Quest. Keppel Quest is Pixlwizz's latest massive multiplayer online game. Players create their own unique characters and guide them towards the completion of the quest implied by the game's title. Along the way, they must explore several levels, each of which is a self-contained fantasy world. Characters must engage with one another, trading goods and information and forming alliances. The game's graphics are excellent and the program's artificial intelligence can match facial expressions and body language to reflect the words being typed in by the player. Telling a competing character that a proposed deal is insulting really does generate all the implied frowns and tensions across the shoulders. Frowns. Moving through the game requires the collection of implements and of treasure. It is worth paying attention because a few items can be found lying on the ground, but generally anything worth having must be traded for experience points that accrue to characters whenever their players are online. Items generally enhance skills. For example, a torch makes it easier to explore caves and navigate through darkened tunnels. Treasure must be collected steadily, otherwise the character will be unable to pay to progress through the portal to the next level. Players must proceed with caution because there are many dangers in Keppel Quest's virtual world. Injuries can only be treated by the purchase of a medical kit, which requires spare experience points. When characters die, their treasure and any other item that they are carrying are lost, and the player must return to the start of the quest. Many players find that aspect of the game compelling because they become increasingly keen to progress through the various levels and uncover the secrets that will be revealed at the end of the quest. It seems like a very interesting game. Keppel Quest is free to play but requires online registration, and online cash purchases are encouraged throughout the game experience. So very highly positive review for the latest massive multiplayer online game by Pixlwizz. And that marks the end of our pre-scene document that has been assigned to you by CIMA for the November 2021 and the February 2022 exam iteration. On that note, I'd like to give you a final reminder that I will be commencing the February 2022 live coaching session on the 1st of January 2022, Saturday at 5 p.m. IST through Zoom. You can join now, register through the link in the description. Or you can find the complete deck on the internet again through the link. On that note, I wish you all the very best, ladies and gentlemen. And I really hope that you will use this video, this pre-scene reading, as a very effective learning tool to help you in the initial stages of absorbing the pre-scene. Thank you very much for being part of the content and part of the journey. This has been phenomenal. And on that note, I bid you farewell. I'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum. That is, may peace be unto you and all your loved ones. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.